Jerome Carter stood quietly in the lobby of the Grand Horizon Hotel, his posture calm, but his eyes sharp, watching everything. To any passerby, he looked like a tired, middle-aged traveler, his dark skin weathered with years of work, his simple jacket wrinkled from the road. But the truth was far more extraordinary. Jerome was the CEO and founder of this very hotel chain, a billion-dollar empire stretching across continents. And yet, at this moment, none of that mattered. Because to the young receptionist behind the desk, Jerome was just another customer, unworthy of even a glance. Kimberly Evans sat perched on her high chair, blonde hair sleek, eyes glued to her phone. Her manicured nails tapped rapidly on the glowing screen as if the world beyond it didn't exist. A lobby full of travelers bustled with energy, suitcases rolling, families chatting, businessmen rushing to meetings, but Kim remained untouched by it all. Jerome had been standing at the counter for nearly 2 minutes. Not a word, not even a welcome had come his way. He cleared his throat politely, offering a small nod. No response. He tapped lightly on the polished marble desk, the sound echoing faintly under the chandeliers. Finally, Kim sighed, put her phone down just enough to look at him, and muttered in a flat, almost dismissive tone, "Yes? What do you want?" Jerome studied her carefully. Her voice wasn't warm, wasn't professional. It was bored, irritated, as if helping him was a burden, as if his presence itself was an inconvenience. "I have a reservation," Jerome said evenly. "The name is Carter, Jerome Carter." Kim raised one perfectly shaped brow. Her eyes flicked up and down his outfit, the worn shoes, the old jacket, the cap pulled low. She smirked faintly, the kind of smirk that hides judgment but can't conceal it entirely. "Carter?" she repeated, dragging the name out as though it must hit her. "I don't see that in the system. Are you sure you booked the right hotel?" Her tone dripped with condescension. To her, he wasn't a guest deserving of respect. He was an intruder, someone who didn't belong in a place this grand. Jerome's jaw tightened. He could feel the sting of her assumption, but he didn't let it show. This was exactly why he had come in disguise. Too many complaints had reached his desk about the staff treating guests unfairly, especially those who didn't look rich. He needed to see it for himself. "Yes," Jerome replied calmly. "I'm sure." Kim sighed dramatically as though he was wasting her precious time. "Look, sir, this is a luxury hotel. The cheapest room here is $800 a night. Maybe you should double-check your booking somewhere less expensive." A couple standing nearby glanced over at the scene. The woman's eyes widened slightly at Kim's words while the man shook his head disapprovingly. But Kim didn't notice, or didn't care. For Jerome, the insult burned, but his voice remained steady. "Check again. Carter, Jerome Carter." Kim huffed, tapping lazily on the keyboard, then froze. The name appeared on the screen. The booking was there, confirmed, paid in advance. But instead of apologizing, she curled her lip. "Well," she said coldly, "looks like someone else booked this for you. Must have been a mistake." Her words were laced with venom, her tone implying one thing, that he didn't belong here, and someone else must have helped him get this room. Jerome felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. He thought of the vision he had when he built this empire, hotels that would be sanctuaries for every traveler, where every guest was treated with dignity. And yet here he was, invisible in his own house. He leaned slightly closer, his deep voice carrying a weight she couldn't recognize yet. "Is that how you treat all your guests?" he asked softly. Kim rolled her eyes. "Only the ones who clearly don't belong." The words landed like a blade, sharp and cutting. For a moment, Jerome felt the weight of every guest who had been ignored, dismissed, or humiliated at this very desk. And in that instant he knew, this wasn't just about him. This was about the soul of his company, and he wasn't going to let it rot. Jerome Carter stood in the center of the hotel lobby, but to everyone around him, it was as if he didn't exist. Guests rushed past with their luggage, the golden chandeliers glimmered overhead, and the polished marble floor reflected wealth and elegance. Yet in that moment, Jerome felt like a shadow, unseen and unacknowledged. To the world, Jerome was the billionaire founder of the Horizon Grand Hotels, a man whose empire stretched across continents. But today, dressed in a simple jacket, worn jeans, and a cap pulled low over his brow, he looked like nothing more than an ordinary traveler, and that was exactly what he wanted. For weeks, reports had reached his desk, complaints of guests mistreated, of staff turning cold and dismissive toward those who didn't look wealthy. He could have investigated from his office, but Jerome knew some truths must be witnessed firsthand. He approached the front desk where a young receptionist sat comfortably, her eyes glued to the glow of her phone. Her name tag read Kimberly Evans, though she made no effort to introduce herself. Her polished nails tapped the screen as though she had forgotten there was a world outside of it. Jerome stood patiently, expecting her to notice. Seconds ticked by. Nothing. Finally, he cleared his throat gently. Still no response. He tapped lightly on the marble counter, his knuckles echoing softly. At last she looked up, not with warmth but with irritation, as though he had interrupted something important. "Yes, what do you want?" Her tone was flat, her gaze quick and dismissive as it skimmed over him. Old shoes, simple jacket, dark skin weathered with age. Jerome smiled faintly, keeping his composure. "I have a reservation. Carter, Jerome Carter." Kim raised a brow, her lips curling into the faintest smirk. "Carter, are you sure you booked the right hotel?" Her voice carried quiet mockery, as if the very idea amused her. "This is a luxury hotel. The cheapest room is $800 a night. You might want to check somewhere more affordable." Nearby, a couple waiting for their luggage glanced over. The woman frowned at Kim's tone, while her partner shook his head. But Kim seemed unfazed, her eyes gleaming with condescension. Jerome's chest tightened, but he did not reveal his anger. This was the moment he had come for. "Please, check again," he said calmly, his voice even but firm. With a loud sigh, Kim turned to her computer and typed lazily. A moment later, her eyes froze. The name Jerome Carter appeared on the screen, confirmed and fully paid. Instead of correcting herself, she scoffed. "Well," she said coldly, "looks like someone else must have booked this for you. Strange, but I suppose you're lucky." Her words dripped with arrogance, each syllable carrying the weight of her judgment. Jerome leaned slightly closer, his deep voice quiet but sharp. "Is this how you treat all your guests?" Kim shrugged, glancing back at her phone. "Only the ones who clearly don't belong." The words cut deeper than she could imagine. For Jerome, it wasn't just an insult. It was a betrayal of everything he had built. He had dreamed of hotels where every guest felt valued, no matter their appearance or background. Now, standing in the lobby of his crown jewel, he felt the sting of the very discrimination he had sworn to fight against. Jerome Carter, billionaire and visionary, stood invisible in his own empire. But as he tightened his jaw and steadied his breath, one thought burned in his mind. This is only the beginning. Jerome's name is right there on the screen, glowing in bold letters, yet Kimberly's expression didn't soften. Instead of acknowledging her mistake, she leaned back in her chair, twirling a strand of her blonde hair with one hand and said, "You'll have to wait. We don't have any rooms ready for you right now." Her tone was sharp, clipped and dismissive, as though she was doing him a favor instead of fulfilling her duty. Jerome's heart sank, not because of her words, but because of what they represented. This wasn't just a single rude employee, this was a reflection of the culture that had begun to seep into his hotel. "Wait?" Jerome asked softly, raising a brow. "My reservation confirms the room is available." Kim smirked, lowering her voice in a patronizing tone. "Sir, rooms for guests like you usually take longer to prepare. I suggest you sit over there until I call you. Or," she tilted her head with a mocking smile, "you can always try a motel down the road. They might be more accommodating." Her words stung like poison, each syllable designed to belittle. Jerome inhaled slowly, grounding himself. He had faced boardrooms filled with doubters, competitors who plotted against him, and investors who once laughed at the idea of a black man building a luxury empire. But never had he imagined standing invisible in the empire he built. He nodded slightly, masking the storm brewing inside him. "Very well, I'll wait." He turned and walked toward a seating area nearby. The plush chairs, imported rugs, and glowing chandeliers that had once filled him with pride now felt tainted. He watched quietly as other guests approached the counter. A young couple dressed in designer clothes walked up, and instantly Kimberly's posture changed. She straightened, her smile wide and polished, her voice sweet and welcoming. "Welcome to the Horizon Grand. Do you have a reservation with us today?" she chirped, her tone filled with warmth Jerome had not received. Within minutes, the couple had their keys in hand, their every question unanswered with enthusiasm. Jerome's jaw clenched. The contrast was glaring. To Kim, status was not about humanity but about appearance. Those who looked wealthy were valued. Those who didn't were disposable. Minutes stretched into nearly half an hour. Guests came and went, but Kim never once called him back to the counter. Finally, Jerome rose from his seat and approached again, his calm presence making her glance up reluctantly. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady. "It's been some time. May I have the key to my room now?" Kim sighed, rolling her eyes. "Fine, but don't complain if the service isn't to your liking. People like you usually aren't happy in a place like this anyway." She slid the key card across the counter carelessly, her nails clattering against the marble. Jerome picked up the card slowly, his eyes locked on hers. There was no anger in his gaze, no shouting, no retaliation, only quiet disappointment. A disappointment that carried the weight of a man who had once believed his dream would stand for respect, fairness, and dignity. "Thank you," he said simply. Kim smirked, already turning back to her phone. "Sure. Try not to cause trouble." As Jerome walked toward the elevator, he felt a mix of emotions rise inside him, anger, sadness, but also resolve. He had come here undercover to see if the stories were true. Now he knew without a doubt the culture of his hotel was rotting from within. And the worst part? His staff didn't even know they were speaking to the man who held their future in his hands. The elevator doors slid shut, and Jerome's reflection stared back at him in the polished steel. A weary traveler on the outside, but beneath the disguise was a leader preparing to confront the truth. For this was no ordinary visit. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The elevator hummed softly as it carried Jerome upward, but the noise could not quiet the storm inside him. Each passing floor felt heavier, as though the weight of his disappointment pressed against the steel walls. By the time the doors slid open, his patience was thinning, not with anger but with sorrow. He had dreamed of creating sanctuaries, places where dignity was as natural as luxury, yet here he stood, a stranger in his own creation. Jerome stepped into the corridor, the carpet thick beneath his feet, muffling his movements. He passed guests smiling as bellboys rushed to carry their luggage, maids politely greeting families in the hall, and managers shaking hands with well-dressed travelers. But there was something hollow about it all. The warmth seemed reserved, selective, given only to those who fit a certain image. His room was at the far end. Sliding the card through the lock, he entered quietly. The suite was immaculate, decorated with gold trimmings and soft lights. It was everything one would expect from a luxury brand. But Jerome felt no pride as he looked around. The beauty of the room clashed with the ugliness he had just endured. He set his bag down, sat on the edge of the bed, and allowed silence to fill the air. Then, almost instinctively, he pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. Inside, he had written every complaint he'd received from guests: rude staff, ignored requests, unfair treatment. He underlined a phrase that seemed to appear again and again: "They made me feel invisible." Jerome closed his eyes for a moment. That phrase now carried fresh meaning. He had lived it, not as CEO, not as a leader, but as a guest stripped of status. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. When he opened the door, a housekeeper stood there, pushing a cart of linens. She was older, with tired eyes and a warm but weary smile. "Evening, sir. Just checking if you need anything." Her tone was genuine, her respect unforced. For the first time that day, Jerome felt seen. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer now. "No, I'm fine." The woman nodded and moved on. That brief exchange reminded him of the heartbeat of his company, the workers who still carried kindness in their duties. The sickness he had witnessed at the front desk was not everywhere, but it was spreading. And if he didn't act, it would poison everything. Later that night, Jerome left his suite to walk the halls. He wanted to see the hotel through unfiltered eyes. Near the lounge, he overheard laughter, two staff members chatting loudly, unaware he was within earshot. "Did you see that guy earlier? The one in the old jacket?" one whispered with a chuckle. Kim said he probably couldn't even afford the doorman's tip. "Can you believe people like that think they belong here?" Jerome's chest tightened, the words sinking deep. They weren't just mocking him, they were mocking every guest who didn't meet their shallow standards. The second staffer laughed. Kim said she almost canceled his reservation just to teach him a lesson. Honestly, I don't blame her. This place is for the elite, not for whoever he is. Jerome stood in the shadows listening silently. The anger inside him simmered, not because of their insults, but because their arrogance was unchecked. This was not one person's failing. It was becoming culture. He turned away, his footsteps slow but purposeful. Back in his room, he sat at the desk, pen in hand, and wrote a single line in his notebook. The test is over. Now comes the truth. Tomorrow, he would no longer just observe. Tomorrow, he would act. The morning sun spilled through the tall glass windows of the Horizon Grand, bathing the lobby in golden light. Guests hurried about, some heading to meetings, others checking out, their voices echoing under the chandeliers. Jerome descended from his suite with steady steps, his expression calm but his heart heavy. Today would be different. Today, he would push further to see just how deep the cracks in his empire ran. He walked toward the restaurant inside the hotel, his simple jacket and cap still making him appear like an ordinary traveler. The maitre d' at the entrance looked him up and down before forcing a thin smile. "Yes, sir?" His tone carried the same edge Jerome had felt the day before. "I'd like a table," Jerome replied. The man hesitated, eyes flicking toward a group of wealthy-looking guests in tailored suits waiting behind Jerome. "I'm afraid we're fully booked for breakfast. Perhaps you could try a diner nearby?" Jerome's brows lifted. The restaurant was half empty. He could see vacant tables scattered throughout, white linens spotless, silverware gleaming. The excuse was hollow, meant only to dismiss. "Fully booked?" Jerome repeated, his voice even. "Yes," the maitre d' insisted. "We cater to certain guests first. It's policy." His eyes flicked deliberately toward Jerome's jacket, then quickly back. Before Jerome could reply, a tall businessman behind him stepped forward. "Reservation for Dr. Lewis," the man announced. The maitre d's demeanor transformed instantly. His smile broadened, his voice softened. "Of course, sir. Right this way." Jerome stepped aside, letting them pass, though his chest burned with indignation. Every move, every word was proving what he feared most. His hotel had become a place where dignity was sold only to the highest bidder. He turned and walked away, his steps measured. By the time he returned to the lobby, his decision was firm. He had seen enough. It was no longer about observation. It was time to test the soul of this place directly. At the counter, Kimberly was once again perched on her chair, scrolling through her phone, her posture slouched. A family stood waiting for assistance, looking frustrated. The father cleared his throat. The mother tried to speak, but Kim ignored them for several long seconds before finally snapping. "What is it?" Jerome's stomach twisted. This was more than rudeness. It was rot, spreading through the core of his hotel. He stepped forward, his presence quiet, but steady. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying calm authority. Kim looked up, her lips curling into the same disdainful smile as the night before. "Oh, it's you again. Did you lose your key already?" Jerome studied her for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I came to ask something else. Tell me, what do you believe this hotel stands for?" She blinked, confused, then scoffed. "Stands for? It's a 5-star hotel. It stands for luxury, for exclusivity, for keeping the wrong people out so the right ones feel special." Her words struck like knives, confirming every suspicion he had carried into this building. Jerome leaned slightly closer, his voice calm but edged with steel. "And who decides who the wrong people are?" Kim smirked, shrugging. Isn't it obvious? Look around. She gestured at the wealthy guests striding through the lobby. It's about class, about image. People who can pay deserve the best. The rest, well, they should know their place. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the family standing nearby froze, shocked at her bluntness. Jerome straightened slowly, his eyes steady. In that instant, Kimberly's arrogance blinded her from recognizing the storm building before her. Interesting, Jerome said softly, his tone laced with finality. Very interesting. As he turned away, heading back toward the elevator, murmurs rippled through the lobby. Some guests had overheard. Some staff had seen. And though Kimberly rolled her eyes and returned to her phone, Jerome knew one truth beyond doubt. The reckoning was near. The tension in the Horizon Grand lobby lingered like smoke after a fire. Guests whispered among themselves about the receptionist's cold words, while staff members exchanged nervous glances. Jerome walked calmly back toward his suite, but every step carried a heavier resolve. The time for quiet observation was over. It was time to let the truth breathe. In his room, he removed the worn jacket and cap that had served as his disguise. He stood before the mirror, gazing at the reflection of a man both tired and powerful. Beneath the ordinary clothes was the figure of Jerome Carter, billionaire CEO, a man who had built this empire from the ground up. He straightened his posture, buttoned a crisp white shirt, and placed his gold watch on his wrist. With each movement, he shed the skin of invisibility and returned to the form the world knew, respected, admired, and feared in boardrooms across the globe. But he didn't plan to return in full display. Not yet. The reveal had to be precise, deliberate. Justice would mean nothing if it wasn't seen by those who had mocked, dismissed, and judged. That afternoon, Jerome requested a meeting through the guest services line, posing still as an ordinary traveler. "I'd like to speak with the general manager," he said calmly. When he arrived in the manager's office, the man behind the desk looked up with a practiced smile. His name tag read, Mr. Collins. His suit was sharp, his demeanor polished. Yet beneath the surface, Jerome sensed the same selective arrogance that had infected the front desk. "How can I help you, sir?" Collins asked, his tone polite but detached, as though already measuring Jerome's worth by his appearance. Jerome sat slowly. "I wanted to share some feedback about your staff." Collins folded his hands neatly. "Of course, we value feedback. Please go on." Jerome recounted his experience, the dismissive receptionist, the maitre d's refusal to seat him, the mocking whispers he overheard. As he spoke, Collins's smile faded slightly, but his eyes betrayed impatience. "I see," Collins finally said. "Well, you have to understand our staff are trained to maintain a certain standard. Sometimes guests misinterpret firm professionalism as rudeness." Jerome's jaw tightened. "You call ignoring guests professionalism? You call mocking them behind their backs a standard?" Collins raised his brows. "Sir, our clientele are among the wealthiest in the world. Appearances matter. If someone feels out of place, that's unfortunate, but it's not always the fault of my staff." The words landed like a hammer. The disease ran deeper than Jerome thought. It wasn't just the receptionist. It was management itself. Jerome stood slowly, his eyes locking onto Collins. His voice was calm, but every syllable carried the weight of authority. "I understand. Thank you for your honesty." He turned to leave, but as he reached the door, he added quietly, "One day, Mr. Collins, you may discover that appearances can be the most dangerous illusion of all." Collins frowned, confused by the remark, but Jerome left without further explanation. That evening, Jerome returned to the lobby. The chandeliers glowed, the air was filled with music from the lounge, and guests moved gracefully through the hall. At the front desk, Kimberly was still on duty, her cold posture unchanged. Jerome approached slowly, his expression unreadable. This time he didn't wear his cap or old jacket. His crisp shirt, gold watch, and commanding aura caught the attention of nearby guests immediately. Without saying a word, Jerome placed his black leather wallet on the marble counter. A business card slipped out, gleaming under the lobby lights. Kim glanced down, uninterested at first, until her eyes froze. The name on the card was unmistakable. Jerome Carter, CEO founder, Horizon Grand Hotels. The color drained from her face. Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering against the desk. Silence spread through the lobby as guests noticed her expression. Jerome leaned forward, his deep voice calm but unyielding. "You told me I didn't belong here. You told me people like me should know their place. Tell me, Miss Evans, what place do you think I belong in now?" Gasps filled the air. All eyes turned toward them. Kim. Early's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Her arrogance, once sharp as steel, now shattered like glass. And for the first time, Jerome allowed his presence, the full weight of who he was, to flood the lobby like a tide. Justice had begun. The silence in the Horizon Grand lobby was so deep it seemed even the chandeliers held their breath. Guests paused mid-step, staff froze in place, and all eyes locked on the card resting on the marble counter. The name gleamed like a verdict. Jerome Carter, CEO founder. Kimberly's hands trembled as she tried to form words, but none came. Her voice, once sharp and dismissive, was gone. The color drained from her face as realization sank in. The man she had mocked, ignored, and humiliated was the very man who owned the ground beneath her feet. Jerome stood tall, his presence commanding yet calm. He didn't need to raise his voice. Authority radiated from him like the sun. "You judged me by my jacket," he said softly, his words slicing through the stillness. "You dismissed me because I didn't fit your picture of wealth. But I built this empire so no guest would ever feel invisible. And yet in my own house, I became invisible." The weight of his voice pressed heavily on the room. Guests nodded, some murmuring in agreement. The family who had been mistreated earlier stood a little taller, relief in their eyes as justice unfolded before them. Kimberly stammered, "Sir, I didn't know. I didn't realize who you were." Jerome's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in piercing disappointment. "That's exactly the problem. Respect should not depend on who someone is. Respect should be given because they are human." The general manager, Collins, hurried into the lobby, his face pale as he realized what had happened. "Mr. Carter," he said quickly, "I can explain." Jerome raised a hand, silencing him. "No explanations. I saw it myself. I heard it myself. This is not about one mistake. This is about a culture that has forgotten its soul." The staff shifted uncomfortably. Guests whispered louder now, phones discreetly lifted to record the unfolding drama. Jerome knew this moment would echo far beyond these walls, and he wanted it to. He turned back to Kimberly. "You told me people like me should know their place. Let me tell you mine. My place is here, as the founder of this company. My place is at the top of the boardroom where decisions are made, and your place, Miss Evans, is no longer here." The gasp that followed was sharp and unanimous. Kimberly's knees nearly buckled as the truth landed. Collins stepped forward, panicked. "Sir, perhaps a warning would be more." Jerome's voice cut through the room. "No, this is not about punishment alone. This is about restoration. The Horizon Grand will never again treat dignity as a luxury." He turned, addressing the entire lobby now. "To every guest standing here, hear me clearly. This hotel, from this day forward, will stand for respect above all else. Whether you wear diamonds or denim, you will be seen. You will be valued. Because no human being should ever be told they don't belong." Applause erupted, first from the family at the desk, then spreading among the guests until the lobby thundered with it. Staff members lowered their heads, some ashamed, others visibly moved by his words. Jerome's gaze swept across the room one final time. "This is not just my hotel. It is my promise, and I intend to keep it." He picked up his card, slid it back into his wallet, and walked slowly toward the exit. Each step echoed with quiet power. Guests parted to make way, many smiling, some clapping, others whispering his name with admiration. Kimberly collapsed into her chair, her arrogance shattered, her career dissolved in an instant. Collins stood frozen, knowing his own reckoning was coming soon. And Jerome Carter, once invisible in his own empire, walked out of the lobby with his head high, leaving behind not just a lesson, but a legacy. For in the says, At single moment, the world was reminded, never judge a person by appearances. Respect is not earned by wealth, but owed by humanity.